Welcome to Clear Conversations, Entrepreneurial Legacies with your host, John Sleeting, an executive partner for Clearwater Capital Partners. Join John and his guests on this exclusive journey behind the scenes of extraordinary entrepreneurial families. In this series, we will dive deep into the stories of John's guests, who generously unveil the paths they've walked, the challenges they've overcome, and the wisdom they've gained along the way. Throughout these conversations, we explore their achievements beyond mere recognition, disclosing the distinctive perspectives that have shaped their entrepreneurial journeys. We hope you enjoy.
Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacies series. I'm John Sleeting, your host, and today I'm joined by Lizzy Lopez. She goes by Lizzy. Lizzy is the founder and CEO of 1349 Tequila. She'll share more about the product itself, but more importantly even is the story behind from farm and growing to creating the product itself and connecting social networks, leveraging human capital, mentor-mentee relationships, and also putting labels aside of what makes a great business person that is so meaningful to be able to live that out no matter what your background is and how you're engaging the world around you. She's inspirational, she's encouraging, and she's going to have a great story to share. So we look forward to engaging in this discussion. Lizzy, thank you so much for being here with me today and having this conversation. There's just a lot that we're going to cover, and I'm really excited about this and the perspective that you bring to our listeners on your own entrepreneurial journey. So as we start out, this term legacy, and what does legacy mean? Before we get into your entrepreneurial journey and business and your background and how you're thinking about the future, help our listeners understand legacy from your viewpoint. How would you define that?
Yes, of course. Thank you, John, so much for having me here. I'm a big fan of Clear Conversations. You have wonderful subjects here with you, and wonderful conversations, really. So I'm just happy to be able to have this platform. But thank you for asking me that. Up until recently, I really didn't give too much thought of what the word legacy mean. The word legacy, maybe a younger version of myself would have responded what many people would respond. Legacy could be a sum of personal items of value, an amount of money in a will, something that you just tangible objects that you just have to leave to someone else. I used to think that the word legacy was reserved for the super wealthy people whose names get written in history books, whose names are part of art collectors or museum contributions. But and really, yes, a lot of that could be true, a sum of personal items. But it's also, I believe, like a summary of your accomplishments, of relationships that you build, of what you accomplish throughout a course of time, throughout your work. I think it's what you're remembered by. And that now more than ever is something that I'm resonating with, because as I embark this entrepreneurship and start forming the building blocks of what I want to be remembered as, I realize that legacy is really important. I want to be able to be remembered by things that I have done, the impressions I have made with people in the community, the work. It's not just about personal things that you leave behind. It's really, I think, more not so much the wealth, but the knowledge that you're able to pass along, the opportunity and the doors that you can open
for others.
Others. So that's definitely something, that I was really self-reflecting on the other day and just really figuring out what that could mean to me, what that means.
And that's the journey for everyone. And that's the part with our listeners, even coming into this and how your thought process is continuing to evolve and change and become more and more crisp, but also meaningful to what that means for you and the one and only life that you have to live in order to fulfill what it is that you want to leave behind. And I do think way too many individuals think about legacy, and especially when they think about it in the context of wealth management, they think about it, well, here's the estate planning documents, and here's the tax returns, and here's the legacy gift to the charity that's there. It's like, yeah, but you're kind of missing the point. The point being, what's the impact that's coming back? And you just said it, right? What's the knowledge you're imparting on others? How are you opening doors for other people's lives? What effect are you having through the charities that you're participating with? All of those items become the cumulative effect of one's life that that only after you're gone, it's that what do you remembered for, right? Or some people say, what is that eulogy aspect of it? So I continue to encourage you and all the listeners, continue to work through that definition, because I think that the purposeful nature of what that term means to them is what also guides their day-to-day. So in your day-to-day, you do have a business. So before we rewind in terms of how you got to where you're at, tell us a little bit about 1349 Tequila.
Yes, of course. So 1349 Tequila it's a woman-owned business, a woman-founded and co-funded
You
business.
are that woman,
I
right?
am that woman. Yeah, I'm really proud of it. I got into this journey back in 2016, and as a farmer, foremost a farmer, and then a producer. And I don't want to call myself a distiller since it's still a journey that I'm evolving in. But I do have a great, incredible group of master distillers that help me bring this profile. But 1349 is the name of my woman-owned brand of tequila. I have a Blanco out and a Reposado, currently working in Añejo. And I got that name from my startup in agave plants of 1,349 plants. And it's been a journey that has been exciting and thought-provoking and challenging and just full of so many fun experiences and a lot of conversational topics that I can touch base on. But it's been honestly something that has pushed me to become more resilient and face the challenges of adversity along with it. And I'm really excited to be, debuting here in my home state of Illinois. So
we'll get into the journey a little bit more. And people can find 1349 online. Can they order it online, or can they only go to retailers to get it? How would people get 1349 if they wanted to?
So if you're in Illinois, you can get it across the state at Benny's Beverage. I really encourage you to go there. They're a great retail place. I love supporting them. I'm also in a few small liquor shops throughout the city, bars and restaurants. And of course, we do ship online to 23 states. You can find more of that information online at tequila1349.com. Okay. We have some markets open as well in Florida and are currently finalizing our negotiations in Texas as well. So you can find all those locations on our website, but definitely shop online or shop at Benny's Beverage.
Well, and I know I'm not a tequila drinker, so I'm sorry to start out the show this way. Please stick around for the next.
You will be at the end of the show.
Yeah, right. But I have gotten bottles and given them to friends that drink tequila, and everybody's come back just with extremely positive rave reviews about what you've produced. But you said you're also the farmer at so when people talk about vertical supply chains and taking the agave plants and bringing that to the end product, help listeners understand what is actually entailed in terms of making tequila if you're also that farmer grower at the very start. And that's where you got your name, 1349.
1349. That is correct. When I got into this business, my father, being an agave farmer himself, and having followed in the footsteps of my grandfather, obviously, throughout the years, they've both done different other lucrative jobs, to make ends meet. But farming was really just something that ran in our family. And when I got into the agricultural side of things, I really started taking a lot from the work and really understanding farming more like an ecosystem and really allowing it to blossom and thrive following old methods. There's just so many different ways now in which people cultivate agave that just it makes me cringe time and time again. But a lot of folks, they have that mentality of out of sight, out of mind. And I actually wish that we could bring a little bit more educational awareness on the importance of farming, on the importance of sustainability, and on the hard work and labor, of how it's very manual work that still has to be done by individuals that are going to be out there in the field for hours at a time. And this starts really manual harvesting. This really just starts with, good soil, really good soil, because there's a difference between dirt and soil. Dirt is dirty. Soil has nutrients, minerals. It's active. It has thriving mechanisms. Yeah. Absolutely. That can in return create something for you. And planting the agaves, there's a time frame too. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes years for you to have a good piña agave that is ready for harvesting and production. A lot of farmers are pulling them earlier now, 4 to 5 years, just to keep up with production demand.
Okay.
And we're seeing a lot of additives being injected into these tequilas that use early agaves because they're just not fully, mature. So I believe in farming a little bit different and waiting, the old school ways. We don't pull anything earlier than 6, 7 to 8 years is really where we like to stay on our mark. I mean, 9 and 10 is unheard of now. I don't think people do that anymore, as you have to quickly keep up with the chain supply and the demand that we
Okay.
see in this industry. We are consumers. We live in a country where tequila still dominates number one in the leading spirits, followed by bourbon, and it's only growing. So I'm really happy to be in this industry because of that. But definitely there's so much that comes with farming, and so much that you can also, it's not just doing this sustainably for the animals, for the vegetation around. It's also being able to provide back to your community and create jobs and opportunity for the locals that, help you really bring this artisanal liquid, this product into the hands of all to enjoy.
So you're not bringing additives in, right, in terms of the product and
No
the
additives.
pure nature of what it is. But there's also, you talk about sustainability. So location, right? The land, the soil that the plant is grown in, and how you harvest that by hand, and the care that comes into play. But there's also some plants, and this is where I was just, as I was preparing even for this conversation, you leave some plants just out there. You don't even harvest them for the sake of product, the pressure of creating more supply into the market, right? Which would be more financially beneficial. If I understand correctly, you leave some plants in place for the sake of
The pollinators.
the nature and the pollinators around them too.
Absolutely. It's important. We're seeing a lot of loss in numbers of the long-nosed bats, which are the bees to our honey.
And thinking about the totality of the ecosystem versus being so narrow in terms of just the product side of it, in terms of just getting the harvest short term that allows for you to continue to grow what you're actually growing. Because if I understand correctly, you started with 1,349 plants, but you've got much more than that today, right? You've continued to grow the enterprise, the farming side of what you're doing, to continue to produce and be able to grow the end product and the sales that are taking place.
Absolutely, John. I started with that at the time. That's all I had money for. But I was lucky enough to not only did I didn't have to buy new land. I was gifted this land from my father. And the great thing about this land, a lot of people believe that, agave only grows to its best sugar content when it's on virgin soil. Like, everything's going to start on new soil. But if you turn over your soil rather than continuously buying and buying and buying and taking away from the communities, and just, and taking away from the land, you can reuse that very same soil and actually turn it over. Like I said, grow it like an ecosystem and reuse it. And in terms of plants, I started with 1,349 plants. That was actually the first batch that I bought. 50%, if not more, come from the first sprout of generations from the plant itself. So I'm actually using their offspring, their very own offspring, to replant. And an agave plant, a healthy one, will create offspring up to 3 times. The first one is definitely one that you want to put in the ground, and then that offspring creates more offspring. So really, there's no need to continue to purchase and consume when you can just live off the very same land, that it's giving you.
Yeah. And so the entirety of the business, because I'm guessing most people, when they're having a shot or a drink of tequila or some sort of any way, are not thinking about all these things. But that's what you're thinking about in order to get to the right product.
Oh, absolutely. Like, in fact, now that I'm going home next week to actually look at the farms, because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to go out and test the soil, test the health levels of our soil, make sure that they're great in minerality and vitamins, if you've gotten enough water. Because, ultimately that's really important, because we try to avoid any kind of pesticides to rev up the growth of it. And with that said, I like looking around and seeing, okay, where am I leaving too much vegetation, where it's, maybe impacting the growing roots of my plants and its offspring. And because I don't remove vegetation, just like I don't believe in displacing animals. They were there far before, we started farming this for profit. So
okay, there's a lot of different places and avenues I want to go down. But we're going to start by rewinding a little bit, because you referenced your father, and obviously you have a close relationship with your father. So we go back in time growing up. I mean, there's a lot of your skill set, drive, understanding. I mean, is that from working, with your father? In prior discussions, you've also talked about grandparents' involvement, and help us understand a little bit more of, Lizzy as a younger person and growing up, and how that shaped who you are today.
Yes, of course. It's very interesting. I get asked this question actually often in interviews, and And I know sometimes you're excited to hear, like a story that involves me growing up in the fields or growing up, around tequila. And sure, a lot of it is true. I grew up around tequila. I did not grow up by any means around the fields. I actually grew up most of my formidable years here in Chicago. I was born and raised here in Chicago. And after spending 10 years here, I moved to Mexico and I spent another 12 there before I ultimately came back here. So, home is both countries, as a Mexican American woman. But growing up, definitely Lizzy was a completely different Lizzy than she is now. I think, situation, circumstance, people, places, they move you, they evolve you. A younger me was, growing up, I was always hungry to do more. I always had tons of drive to outgrow myself every single year. And my grandparents, something that I definitely learned from them was work ethic. They had incredible work ethic. The work ethic that I obtained from my grandfathers, that just a determination of making sure that they made a name for themselves, in our community, in our town. And then as I grew older, my father definitely was a huge building block for me in my formidable years. I went to college for something completely unaffiliated with what I do today. But nonetheless, it built a lot of character in me. And seeing that, I think seeing my father, what he definitely passed down to me is just his eagerness, his hunger, his drive, his resilience to really make something happen. And he sees no obstacles. There's nothing that he doesn't have a solution. And every obstacle for him is just a lesson to be learned and one that he wants to challenge and defy and conquer. And I love that. Most people would be a little bit more pessimistic about like, well, this is hard. I can't get there. Maybe we should give up.
Yeah.
My father's the most optimistic person you'll ever come to meet.
So we started out talking about legacy and what that means to you personally. But when you look to your, grandparents, when you look to your parents, how would you describe the legacy that they've created that you're continuing to live out? You thought about that at all?
I thought about that actually, John. It's funny. That's exactly what I was thinking about when I started thinking about the word legacy. I was thinking to myself, okay, in quite honesty, am I continuing a legacy or am I creating my own from scratch? And I'm actually still trying to figure that out. In terms of my grandparents' name, our family name, I'd like to think that I am continuing it as they were notable people, known in my town, in my state for a lot of their wealth contributions to the town and community contributions. And I feel like I want to continue, holding on, which is, why I've always held on to my last name, Lopez, regardless of, my situations and relationships. And I wanted to be able to create something more, to say, I'm not the first to go to college in my family, but I'm not the first to build a business. My father has built his business, himself, maybe not as a corporation or LLC, but as his own type of enterprise. But I am the first to definitely break barriers in terms of trying things that are unknown, taking a chance, taking the risk, taking all of the risk, and being able to give back to communities, along the way, because that has been really important for me to foster that. But definitely, I think just being able to stay in the business of tequila making, of agave growing, because I'm the first one to bring tequila, into the market, even though my grandfather worked with agave just for investment purposes, and my father did too for lucrative reasons. I'm the first one to actually turn it into something.
Product further. And so now you've got me thinking too, because I think it's both and, right? You can continue to live out legacy that was created, right, by those that went before you, because we all have, there's times when I speak with people, I'm like, we all have 8 biological great-grandparents, right? And it's just the math. And yet 8 biological great-grandparents, it's really hard for people to name. Usually it's hard for people to name even a few of them. So within really only a few generations, right? Your, great-grandparents to you, how do you name them? What does that mean? And yet all the actions and the work that they've done to give the opportunities to successive generations is part of their legacy. Even if we don't even know our great-grandparents' names, the actions that they took have an effect on where we're at. So back to that impact piece of it. But then to forge your own path, right? To create your own path, to create that legacy for you, but it dovetails into the story that came from the generations before us. And sometimes people think, well, legacy has to be, just this big grand thing. Legacy can also be very negative, right? A legacy could be a negative action that's taken and the negative ramifications that has on subsequent generations, or it could be positive. And we also have the opportunity sometimes to change that narrative, right? To step in and say, well, here's a negative narrative that was coming to me, but I'm going to change the trajectory to make it a positive narrative for future generations as well. So I do wonder on that if there's that both and.
Oh, absolutely. And I can think about it now. I mean, you go to my town and ask, about my grandfather's name. You'll get stories about him that will make you laugh. Get stories about him that make you cringe. People had to do what they had to do to survive, right. and everybody, but the name, he was always known for his positive ripple effect on people. And I can say the same thing about my father. He's the most generous person. He's the kind of guy, and I actually wish he understood more English so that he could listen to this and probably laugh, or he'll probably kill me. But he's the kind of guy that would, borrow from Peter to lend to Paul. He was just that kind of man. There was just never there was nothing that ever came in between him. And I'm talking about a person that, my father didn't even get the opportunity to go to high school. He didn't even finish grammar school. And yeah, I think about how sometimes—
This your father?
This is my father.
Okay.
And I think to myself, I can't believe this man with such little resources educationally had the opportunity to give us a life that only we could dream of, and build homes for us and invest in real estate for us and, have farms for us. Cause, he was really focused on leaving a legacy and generational wealth for us. And everything great is only one generation away from extinction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I do think these subsequent generations, as they take on the best of, hopefully the best of what, comes from preceding generations, but they think like a first generation entrepreneur, right? So you shared this legacy coming from grandparents and parents and the opportunities that's created. And you're also saying, but I'm also going to go create my own, right? So you're thinking first generation, even though there's also being a subsequent generation. And actually, I believe that makes great entrepreneurs, but also great stewards in terms of what they're entrusted with and how they carry that into the future, right? The negative analogy is where people always talk about the trust fund kids, right? And then they are like, okay, well, they got their trust funds, they're living, they're just, they're not thinking like first generation entrepreneurs themselves and carving a new path. They're just living off of the field. I'll probably come up with some really bad farming analogies on this, but they're just living off the field. They're doing their own thing and they're consuming it, which is unsustainable,
Exactly.
Using that terminology, into their own futures and what that means. And it's just a question of going, I don't know what their legacy is going to be in that case, because you do need to turn around and say, okay, this is fantastic. I have a head start. I've got some learning that's taken place. I've got work ethic that I've been taught. And I'm also now going to apply that in a direction where now you're bringing a whole new product line into the world from scratch.
Oh, absolutely. And John, it's funny. I get that asked all the time. Just the other day, someone congratulated me, and I'm thinking, they're congratulating me for what? What? How do they define success? I can have a brand on shelves all day long. Is it selling? Is a different question. Are consumers into it? Am I going to stay in this business? It's a whole different question. And those are, when people see this, they're like, well, you got help. I'm like, well, I got helped in terms of was able to acquire the knowledge, the ethics, the work hunger, from the legacies, before me. Absolutely. Was I lucky enough to have someone like my father who is brilliant in farming, help me start up? Great. Did I have the opportunity of an investor to come in and give me mentorship and give me the capital funding to start this up? Absolutely. But I'm taking the entire chance. I'm taking the entire risk.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my name out there now, affiliated with the brand, representing and being, most likely, it's the pressure of me trying to be a role model for other women in business, for other people in business, not even that. And now the stakes are so high, and I feel like expectations are held so high. And the pressure of that, the societal pressure, is just really something that I can't even explain to people. When they come up and they're like, oh my God, it must be so great. Like you say, they think that I've like inherited all of this. The only thing I've inherited is knowledge, the drive, and the idea. I'm on my own from that point over. I'm completely on my own.
And when we were speaking previously, you talked about hating labels. And yet even, in our discussion too today, there are descriptions of who we are as individuals. So I want to come back to that in a moment, but I want to go back to like day one. Like, when was the idea born in your mind to say, yep, I'm going to go launch a tequila company? What clicked there? What transpired? And then what was the actions that you started taking to make it the reality that it is?
To make that happen, it was actually, I do remember this. I want to say it was probably like March 21st of 2020. I know it was somewhere in the 20s because I had just gotten back from a trip to Disneyland, and then the whole COVID-19 pandemic came, and then everything was just shut down. And I remember being home for like 3 weeks, and I was lucky enough to stay employed in my previous job, but the uncertainty of job security just hit me. I remember being at home and thinking, I was going through some paperwork at the time. I had a little bit of downtime, and I had just come back from Mexico as well. I was there in January, and then I went to Disneyland in February. So come March, when everything was shut down, I had to come back with some paperwork for some agaves that I had registered because, I invested in this in 2016 just as a lucrative investment, not knowing, I was going to sell this to another distillery later on once it reached the proper age of growth. So it's 2020, and I was just sitting there doodling, thinking of something, and I was having a conversation with my father, and he was saying, he's like, it'd be such a great idea if you actually began your own product line, And I was like, I don't know. I'm like, I have the idea, I just don't have the funds. And he's like, it'd be great, honey. He's like, you can. And we went back and forth with a few names that I wanted to maybe trademark. And I remember as I'm just sitting there, just doodling, looking at the paperwork, I'm thinking like, I don't even have, enough product. I'm like, look at this. And I remember looking at the registry for the first agave that I had cropped, and I saw the number of 1,349 plants. And I'm thinking, you know what, maybe this could become something. And I sat on it for a little bit longer. And then a few weeks went by, and then I realized that every business was closed, offices were closed, everything was closed, with the exception of liquor stores and cannabis stores. And I thought, well, that's interesting. We can't go to church, we can't work out, but we can go and buy alcohol. So then I'm like, this could be probably a recession-proof industry, because one way or another, we're all consuming. And then I was like, I think that's a brilliant idea. And at the time, as I mentioned, I was working for a non-for-profit, and a very close friend of our family and his wife that we've known for many years, for 20 years, that were also great supporters of our charity, heard about this. And they're like, well, we hear that you might be investing in something. And we were actually looking to invest, is the possibility of a partnership there if we fund this? And I'm like, you know what? I think absolutely. Let me get to work. I started a business plan. I started the idea, and I didn't even get a chance to pitch it to them when they were like on board. So I was really excited for this. It was really, to say I struck gold in terms of luck, yes, I do believe that, some people, because I could have easily been pitching this for a whole year to 100 different investors, and and I'm happy I never even went there, because I don't even know if I could have pitched it back then. I didn't even know what a business plan was or what it looked like. But
you had the idea.
I had the idea.
I had the drive. You knew it was good.
Drive. I had the resources. I had the agave, and the fact that I come from Arandas, which is, the land of tequila, I figured, why not put all of these things and people and knowledge and resources together and really, bring something to the market, something that I believe in, something that it's not like I was bringing an unknown first time launch of something new to the consumer. They're already consuming it. I just had to make sure that they consumed mine.
So it just struck me when you were saying that you laid out, you took an inventory of what are all the assets, right? In terms of doing that. And this is where I think all too often people default to, well, the assets are a financial number. It's like, well, no, the assets also include what you bring, right? Your intellectual capital, your human capital, your time in terms of what you're bringing to it, the relationships, the fact that you had, the agave plants themselves,
equity, absolutely.
The idea, right? The ability to bring the human ability to bring people together, right? Inspire others to invest right out of the gate, where you didn't have to go pitch an idea, but it was that self-evident to those individuals to go, yeah, this is a great idea. And you've got the know-how and you've got some history, and then they could bring something to it too. That becomes the totality of assets. When people are working through that business plan, I think sometimes they miss the assets aren't just go and raise to financial capital. You've got to have a great idea, the recession-proof nature of it, looking around, is there a market for it? the fact that your tequila is distilled differently than others are from the non-additive component that's in there in terms of what that means back for individuals. So you look at all of those assets that make it up. And I think that's where some entrepreneurs fall short early on. It's like, I have an idea and I need money to go do it. It's like, well, I'm not sure you've taken a full inventory
Exactly.
of what could come into play.
No, and you're right about that, because when I started this, sometimes I grow every year, every single year. In fact, I was actually invited to be a judge on the Teen Shark panelist for a high school, and it was brilliant. I remember sitting there and thinking, oh my God, these kids are so well composed. Their ideas are fabulous, and their pitch business plans are so much better than anything that I could have come up with. And I'm thinking, and they're 17 years old. It was so inspiring. But it wasn't until that moment when I was there and I was going through all of their bullet points and all of their, like their mission, what they need, what they're doing, that I realized I already knew the answers to all of this. I never had to materialize it because I got the opportunity, like you said, of having the right people, the right assets, and not just having an idea and finding the money. It's making sure, like, does the market need it? Is there room for it in our industry? Is it something that's trending? Is there a consumer for it? And the most important capital that I've ever had brought into my business has been social capital. There's no doubt about it, because you can have unlimited amount of money to make something work. But if the need is not there, if the support is not there, if your audience is not there, there's no reason to be in business.
So the lessons learned there in terms of connecting with people and connecting with the right people. It's another area sometimes I look at, whether it be people's business plans or their thoughts or how they're, it's like you're describing your product, not your product specifically, not 1349, but just people looking at it broadly. Well, who am I trying to connect with? And it's the proverbial throwing the spaghetti on the wall and hoping something sticks. It's like, no, but if you're getting to the right individuals, and the right customers, the right segmentation, the right distributors. So how is some of that work within the nonprofit world? How's that translated into the spirits world, of tequila sales? How have some of those lessons learned translated over to actually make you better at the business side of what you're doing?
It's made me better in terms of building relationships. I believe in giving my attention to every single person that is interested in the brand, whether it's 5 minutes of my time that they want or 3 hours of my time. The truth is that they're most likely a consumer, a supporter, a believer, or someone seeking for mentorship. And I've been on that other side of the spectrum where I understand how important it is to develop relationships like that. And when I was in the nonprofit industry, I remember that my goal was to communicate with people what we were about in hopes that later on we can collaborate or partner or count on them. So that has definitely moved with me, because now I find myself doing that with people all the time. If I see someone who has, just even being here alone has been social capital. Me getting to meet Josh, who I met through my dentist, who I met through my trainer, that has connected me ultimately back to you, who has given me this incredible platform to tell my story and bring this to, listeners everywhere. That's really what social capital is. And that's what you gain. That's actually what I've kind of learned from my time in charity, when you build these relationships, and I have moved them to have them transpire the same way in my company, because you never know who you're going to shake hands with. You never know who's in the room with you. It could be someone small, someone big, but these are the people that are going to help you get to places and move forward.
And so saying yes to certain relationships, saying yes to certain opportunities also means that you have to say no to other things, because all of a sudden, right?
I don't know how to say no, John.
So share more about that. What have you learned about saying no over time?
I'm learning that now, actually, now that it's funny, like I said, when I started this company, I wasn't really on the number side of things, but my investor, who's a brilliant man, who I'll get into later if I have the opportunity to talk more about mentorship, but he's the one that told me, like, listen, there's going to be things and places and people that you're going to have to say no to, because it's not going to be financially sustainable for you as a startup company, as a company. And it's hard because there's so many things that I believe in, so many things that I'm involved in. I sit on the board for 2 charities because I really do believe still in the giving back aspect, and not because I feel like it's my corporate social responsibility to do, but it's because something that I genuinely believe in fostering and growing and being part of. And it's hard because now that I'm in a position, of a brand, I get I get people and companies all the time like, hey, we'd love for you to come and do this and sponsor, and we'd love for you to help us do an event. And as much as I want to do them all to get in front of the crowd, the right people, the future consumers, I also have to learn how to say no. I have to now think about it from a numbers perspective. What is something, number one, can I physically do this? Can I emotionally, submerge myself in this again? Because like I said, I do it all myself because it's a personal journey for me. And, and I'm also a one-woman show. It's not like I'm a big major corporation. So I give my time to everything, to everyone. But I have to also realize, is this something that's going to move the company forward? Is it something that's going to generate sales for me? Is it something that is going to create an impact? Am I going to matter in the room? Am I going to be able to give something more than just a free product for people to consume? I want to make sure that I'm aligned with the right things, with the right people. A year ago, I just gave it all like a sailor. You don't even know, like a drunk sailor, just giving it all. I was like, Oprah, you get this, you get this, you get this. But now I learned my lesson, as I grow and I evolve every single year. And then you just have to figure out to have boundaries and have to say no sometimes, unfortunately, just for the sake of your company's health and for your mental health, and just to make sure that I'm not stretched out so thin.
Yeah. You have to say no so you can say yes to the best versus trying to say yes to everything. And
Absolutely.
That's the flip side, because everyone hears, okay, social capital, I got to go out and build these networks. And it's like, well, but yes, but not for everybody, right? Not with everyone. You got to say no to some. So you're working into that situation with your suppliers, with your customers, with the people, the influence that can come with individuals. Keep saying no, right? So you brought up that learning from the mentor relationship that you even have with your lead investor with you. Talk more about mentorship, menteeship, and what that means to you on an informal basis, right? There's formal education, and you mentioned that a little bit earlier, but the informal side of what that means, how has that shaped you?
No, absolutely. The informal side of it, when he came on board as just an investor, I assumed he would come on board just as a silent angel investor. But the amount of, and listen, we have our differences every day. We argue every day because he does things old school, and I'm just kind of trying to pick up, social cues from everything that we see now and modernized, different ways, the innovation that we see. But if you actually had the opportunity to listen to his story, John, it would bring you to tears. It's a man that, can't really write, didn't, finish the 6th grade, and left home at a really, really young age, and was the first of his generation to not only do something, become something, to make money. And he did it because he didn't want to be poor anymore. He said, I'm not going to be poor. My family's not going to be poor. And I don't even think he knows how much I admire that from him, because I wonder how he feels now being at the age that he is. And he is still super humble. Like if someone else saw it from the, another person looking outside in would be like, oh my God, here's this white privileged man, who has all this, opportunity, and everything was given to him, and it's so great. And that's terrible to have that type of virtue signaling, because really he has employed so many people that look different, that sound different backgrounds, people that probably didn't even have the skill set or education, but were excited to learn, and gave them that opportunity, build companies, sold companies. And now his sons, do very well for themselves. His grandsons do very well for themselves. Now that's a legacy. When I look back on the whole legacy thing, I'm thinking, even though I didn't have I haven't had the stepping stones, and by no means did I grow up as, poor like he did. Just seeing all of this come to play and see it in front of you, I think to myself, this is really what I consider a mentorship, and what I consider a legacy, someone that could really break the mold and break what the societal standards of what one person should do over another, based on your background and where you come from. Everyone assumes that, the white man is successful because they're white and they come from money and they come from education and but truthfully, we're all made the same. I think it's all really about drive, rather or not you get the mentorship.
In that relationship where it's more than financial capital, it's more than just being an investor and stepping back. And it's also smart business on his part in terms of investing in you, not just financially, but also that relationship. And so, like in an ideal mentor-mentee relationship, how would you see that playing itself out? Because you put yourself in that role, But how did that evolve, right? Was there encouragement coming in? Did you seek out the feedback
You know
there and
what?
asking
It's
questions?
funny. Like when you come back to that, I never seeked it out. I assumed that if he saw there was something going on with the company that needed attention, that he would come and, and put attention. And of course he does, because, as an investor, you're in the business of making money.
Mhm.
You don't invest in something that is not going to produce or something that's not going to do well. But at the same time, early on, I made the mistake of not seeking mentorship because I don't know if I was really ready for that type of feedback or constructive criticism, or, to feel like maybe my idea was undermined, or I was, and then I realized later on, I'm like, that type of pride was keeping me from growing. And now whenever I seek mentorship, I am the first person to come to you and be like, hey, I would love 5 minutes of your time. I'd love to pick your brain for 10 minutes. I recently actually just did that with another person in the spirits industry. And I never thought it would go anywhere because this person is, somewhat like a celebrity in the industry. And I messaged them on Instagram and it's like, I love your stuff. I love your product. Kind of stalk this person in a healthy way. And then finally the person's like, so what's up? So what do you do? I'm like, so this is what I do. And I know that you come to Chicago often. So the next time you're in Chicago, I figured you have to have coffee anyway, right? So do you want to have coffee with me? And that way I can kind of pick your brain and, maybe we can walk me through a business model. He's like, well, you're right. Did you have to have coffee? He said, you have to come to me. I'm like, I'll walk with you if I have to. So that's what I did. And you take from that. And I'm really open for people that are seeking for mentorship. And I may not have all the answers or all the knowledge or, don't have, an actual script of how to do things A to B.
Yeah.
But I'm the first person to give you a piece of advice,
But you learn that in over a few years. I mean, how often do you think pride actually gets in the way of individuals growing? Because I love the way that you said that, right? It's like, your pride got in the way of you growing, right? The thing that you wanted to do that you were proud of in growing the business was actually getting in the way of you realizing the growth itself.
Absolutely. I feel like we all just assume that we're experts in our own field, and we don't want to be undermined. And you're like, well, no, I don't need this because I know how to do this because I've been doing it. But the truth is that that's very detrimental to the growth of yourself personally and to whatever you have. And I realize that now. And now I'm not ashamed to ask a lot of people, they especially, I've gotten just a few weeks ago, I was offered an opportunity to be the guest speaker at an event in front of all these women who are business owners and influential women. And I'm thinking, this is such a nice opportunity, but by no means do I even feel that I can sit in the same chairs as these women, but obviously someone thought I could.
Right.
And that alone made me feel like, why would I actually say no to this? You're right. I may not have the capital they have or the experience or the years in the industry or be a national brand, but I have my own story to bring to the table and my own piece of advice. And obviously there's a fan base, and I call it fan base because in this industry or in any industry as a working person, woman, Latina, however you want to call it, you will see different sets of people that are your fans, different fan clubs, I call them, and some people are very excited to hear your story. Some people want to see how they can learn from you, how they can benefit from you, how they can, get through you. So it's been definitely, interesting navigating all of these uncharted waters, but I am the first person to admit a mistake. I'm the first person to reach out when I need help now. I think there's always room to improve. There's always room to learn more. And if I have the opportunity to doing that from people who are the best at what they do, or even if it's not a success story, but a failure story, those are the ones you learn more from.
Yeah. But it's fascinating because the pride got in the way on one hand in terms of the growth opportunity that's there. So you break through the pride. And then even on this request to say, well, come and speak, then doubt comes in.
Exactly.
Right. So it's like this, both sides of that. It's like you feel like you
sides.
get beat up or going, well, no, I want to be pride. I got to let my pride diminish here and also not doubt so much. There's a saying that John Chapman, our CEO, has, which is suspend disbelief. Suspend disbelief. Because all too often people disbelieve, right? They don't believe that they can actually accomplish or do something or should be in a situation. It's like if you suspend disbelief that you're not the right person to be doing that, you can actually do that, right? So it's like bring your pride down, allow others in, and suspend disbelief and actually move forward into that because other people are seeing things in you that you're not seeing in yourself.
And it's
maybe.
true.
And that becomes empowering then moving forward.
That's great, actually. That's going to be my new mantra. It's true because sometimes, it's true what they say. Sometimes your worst enemy is yourself. It's all the doubts. It's all when you start to compare yourself to someone else's success or to how someone else got somewhere faster. And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
I'm proud of what I've done. There's no doubt about it. It's been a lot of work, but sometimes I also feel like it's pretentious of me to even say that I'm a person of success. I mean, what is success? To me, just really getting up every single day and surviving another day is success. It's something that I celebrate. It's those small milestones.
Right. Absolutely. So I gave John Chapman credit for that, right?
No,
so
yeah.
that's that on it. That's
We'll put that in a quote.
Yeah, exactly. No, but it's true, and I think I think that becomes very empowering for people to do that, and then step in, and then also bring your pride down to be humble enough to accept the feedback and learn from that, and then that accelerates the growth, right? And that accelerates that flywheel. We said early on, right, that there's again I think if I quote you, I think the way you said, right, is you hate labels, right? You want to be known as a great business person with a great product and serving the people that you're serving. And so just strip away the labels, right? That very broadly, you want to be a great business person with a great product and what you're doing to serve the people you are. Is that accurate, first of all?
No, absolutely, John. The truth is that, you'll see, going back to what I was saying, you'll have a group of people that support you, and, you'll have, your fan club that supports you for this, the cultural people that are with trends that are supporting you because of that. And it's hard really to fall into one single category where I want to be able to be supported because, number one, I have a great product. I have a great product that people already consume. They're just consuming different kinds. I think my story is something that maybe would drive people to give it a try, give me the support. And most importantly, as a human being, setting aside that I'm a woman, setting aside that I'm a Latina, because people want to hear that. People are always like, oh my God, you're a Latina woman in business. How does it feel to break down barriers? How does it feel? I'm like, it feels exactly the same way I feel as if I was anything else or anyone else, because the work is still there, and I don't want to fall into that whole victimhood of someone making me feel like I am the exception and that I'm changing the game. I'd like to think that I'm paving, pathways for many people in terms of the work, not because of who I am or how I look or where I come from, or because of how I sound, and you get a lot of that, I think it's great to be a woman in this industry because it is a male driven industry. I think it's great to be a Latina woman, but I really didn't even think of that because, altogether, tequila is a native to Mexico. So it's like, I don't even know what that means when people say that. But most importantly, like me as a human being, I want to continue growing from that aspect. And I want to continue getting the support from people because they believe in it. Because, that whole trend of categorizing and labeling me is just a trend, and trends are going to die and good products don't, and that's really what I'm trying to strip myself away from. And believe me, I probably strike a lot of chords every single day with folks. And maybe I hit some people differently, good or bad, but ultimately it can't really compromise my principles or what I believe in because then I'm trying to have a voice for nothing. And I think there's a lot of people that feel this way, a lot of women in the industry that feel this way of different backgrounds. They just don't want to say it out loud.
And so when you have your belief system and your values and the way that you look at yourself and want to be defined, and yet the world does apply labels, right?
Creating labels in society, I think, is actually, it's backtracking the progression of people and really diminishing their success, because we should be able to get recognized for the work that we do, what we provide, what we bring to the table, and not allow one or the other to stand out based on what you look like, what your background's like, who you are. I think every individual is going to have a very unique story, but putting labels on people, what they do is you separate them into groups, where then now I actually feel less part of a diverse and inclusive world when I'm put in this label. I get invited sometimes to speak at events and present, because I'm a woman, a minority of color, in this industry, male dominated industry. But then sometimes I go there and I'm thinking, they're like, oh, how does it feel, to be breaking the mold of everything that, you've been told that you couldn't do? And how does it feel to be a Latina woman in this industry, being a voice of change and being, do you feel different? And I'm thinking, I do now.
Yeah.
But I didn't before.
I didn't walking in, but now I do.
Walking in, I felt like everyone else in the room, but I didn't realize that I guess I wasn't like everyone else in the room. And it's, up until that point, I didn't see myself as anyone different. I didn't have a label that determined my race or my gender up until that point where you made it a point. And they do it with the intention of making you feel special, but really they just put you in a pocket of everything that they say that they're against. I don't know if that makes sense, but and I'm thinking
right. And that's why it's a hard subject.
It's a hard subject, but I'm thinking you invited me to something that's supposed to be about diversity and inclusion. There is no diversity and inclusion at all.
Because everyone's been put into a smaller box to define that with the labels on it versus the totality of who they are and bringing to that. And that's why you're looking at that saying, I want to be a great business person with a great product, serving, great people. And in a lot of ways, you want to be aligned with the right people in terms of your investors, your suppliers, how you're getting the product out there, and hope that everybody's enjoying the product.
My
right?
consumers all I have a little bit of everything in my life, so I have to make sure that, I can't go on one side. I have to appease everyone. I have to be, there has to be a lot of gray area in the things that I do and that I say that I'm part of. So sometimes it's hard for me to turn down opportunities that I feel single me out from being part of other people, communities, and things, because really I believe in things that are good. I believe in creating a positive impact. I believe in bringing and creating a ripple effect that's going to bring good to people, that's going to create opportunity, regardless of stances. So to shift gears a little bit in terms of business, several years old now in terms of the business, the growing of that business, the realizing the success of that business, shifting a little bit to this concept of wealth management. So as you're realizing that, another saying from John Chapman, right? The unavoidable consequence of this is going to be the success and the financial success from running a great business. If you do what you just said, what you want to be known as, a great business person, having great products, serving great people, and you're gonna do that. You're also gonna create this wealth for your investors and for yourself in terms of the return on the business. You're gonna be having financial assets to allow continued growth with land and new plants and broader distribution, and that continues to build, right? That is that back to an ecosystem, a sustainable ecosystem, one with the plants and the farm, and how that analogy even comes into this, the business is going to continue to grow, and you're going to realize the success financially. As you think about the business as an asset on your personal balance sheet, and some of the conversations you've had with Joshua, directly in our office, and even some of the conversations that we've had together on this topic, how has your thought process regarding what wealth management is about evolved over time? No, it definitely has evolved. It's something that I really didn't ask myself. I didn't, up until recently, I didn't realize who is a candidate, to discuss wealth management and estate planning. And it's probably naive of me, but, like I said, I always assumed that was just for like super wealthy people with tons of homes and investments elsewhere. I started this business in 2016, but truthfully, I've been on the market for exactly a year, actually this month. I've been actually selling.
Congratulations, Ed.
Thank
Happy
you.
anniversary, right?
It is. It's my anniversary of actually, selling directly to consumers. So it's been, it's been exciting. And obviously there's a lot of, there's a lot of spend, when you try, it's true what they say, you got to spend money to make money. But with that said, we're seeing sales. And if we continue to stay in what I think is going to be a very great year for us and expand our distribution and expand our markets and hopefully, one day become a national brand, I do start thinking, what could that mean for me? What could that mean? Obviously, my investors, they have their estate planning in place. Obviously, they've been doing this for a long time, build companies from the ground up. Me being my first time, I want to be able to nurture what I already have and grow it even further, so I am starting to, really think about what wealth management means. I want to not only manage it to maintain it, but to grow it and make sure that I'm able to maximize the return and put it, into places where it'll do me good in the long run. So
Right.
definitely, I'm super excited to have come. Really, that's how we met, and Josh has been such a great, asset in helping me understand this, and it's a new language, and even, you'll come to see, like, in future meetings that we have, because I am super excited to take this forward with you. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions because there's just so much that people don't understand. I think that people get overwhelmed by that. And I think maybe that's one of the first initial reasons why I kind of shied away from having these conversations, because I felt I didn't understand them enough. I didn't know if I qualified or was a candidate for it, because I didn't know what that really meant. And now more than ever, you think about that, back to, legacy and wealth management is something that I'm definitely, that can get paired up into something.
Well, in the philanthropic aspect, how do you do that sustainably? If you gave everything to a charity, then it's all gone. Well, that's not sustainable.
Oh gosh, believe me, that's like,
and that could be bad giving, right?
That could be bad giving.
So good giving is really hard in terms of how you think about what you're doing philanthropically, how are you, working that in terms of tax strategies and the financial components that come in. You mentioned something earlier too, the expertise it takes to be an expert in anything. There's a humility that comes with that, because you can't be an expert in anything else if you're an expert in something. And that's where a lot of times people that are truly experts in what they're doing are some of the most humble people, because they knew what it took to get there, and they can't possibly have that same level of depth of understanding on anything else. Right? I'm not going to pretend to understand how to plant agave plant or harvest it, or grow that, or even distilling, all those sort of things. So and we see this with a lot of business owners. They're fantastic in the depth of what they bring, and then they realize that great success in what they've created, and then they've got to apply some thought process, which is where we come alongside a lot of this entrepreneurial wealth, in order to say, okay, now how do you think about these other areas for your family, for your future generations? Not that that's a legacy, right? So that's why I don't want people confused. That isn't the legacy, but the legacy is how the tools are used, the resources are used to build that life and make that impact on the world that you want to make.
No, absolutely. But wealth management, to that point, I had a conversation with my consultant, a few weeks ago, and they were like, it's great that you're giving, but your marketing spend has to go to tasting events, to on-premise events where you can bring this product to the hands of future consumers, not to all these charitable contributions. It's great, but you have to keep, your donations and your sponsorships to a minimum. But if you are making them, make sure that, you can get the tax benefit from it. And it's things that you just never think about, because, it's, and listen, this year I've definitely woken up and I'm being, okay, there's a lot of things that I can, improve in and perform better in. And as a CEO, you learn these roles every single day. As an entrepreneur, like the word entrepreneur, I used to always hate it growing up, because I'm thinking, what do they prenew? Like, what does that even mean? Anybody can be an entrepreneur, but now I realize that it just means really like someone who wears so many hats, whose roles are always changing, and every day is never the same. I never know where I'm going to end up. When I wake up, I could have a whole calendar made and a schedule, and none of it ever actually comes to happen. But one thing that I realized, I can't be the only salesperson. I've learned I can't be the bank. I've learned I can't say yes to everything. I have to definitely, set up some boundaries, on how accessible I am to people and things. I have to continue to, further my education and my research, even in my own field, because, as you mentioned, you can be an expert about a lot of things, but if you only focus on one area, then you're never going to grow outside of your other area. So definitely want to, obtain more knowledge of many different things as I'm doing them, and preparing for the future is one of them, so, talking about how you're growing what you already have, and being able to allocate that into the right places and put that in the right hands of people, like you, there is an expert there. I don't expect you to be an expert in agave. Why would you? You're an expert in estate planning and wealth management, and this is why, this is another part of, of social capital. This is knowing the right people that are going to help you,
and living
grow.
in community, everyone having their different things that they're focused on. What are your hopes for the next 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever? How do you, as you look forward, what are your hopes for what's next?
I do have an end game, John. It is the truth. Like I would be lying if I told you that I want to stay in this business for the next 100 years. God knows willingly I won't live that long. But I'd love, on a business point of view, I'd love to grow into a national brand. I would love to see this, in every state. I'd love to see this in every bar and restaurants, be a great spirit that would have different lines, here coming forward, like the añejo is coming out. I'd like to get into a mezcal. There's only so much you can produce in this industry, but there's always room for innovation and improvement. I would, though, however, also like to see myself on a personal note. My end game would be to do well in the business where either in the future I'm able to gain more employees to help me run this company like a machine, or have the opportunity to merge with another portfolio whose brands I love and believe in, who have, a great story and also, great ethically sourced products. Because truthfully, my end game is to one day have a family, have a family of my own and start building my personal legacies with them. And, with that said, which is why it's so important to put into my wealth management planning into the right hand so that I can be able to preserve that and grow that and have that. But definitely, I'd like to see myself, not just with my family of tequila growing, but a family of my own, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot going on.
A lot going on. There's so many things.
keep practicing that no muscle in terms of what you're saying no to, so you can keep saying yes to those best things that keep you on that exact path. So as you're thinking through kind of maybe some closing thoughts as we begin to wrap up, is right. I love the attitude in terms of, no labels. And yet you can speak to audiences that you have a voice that I can't, right? You have different life experiences than I do, right? I mean, that is part of the beauty of diversity of thought, diversity of backgrounds, diversity of heritages. So bringing that together, you can speak to audiences that some people, as you even said earlier about the gentleman, right, that could be looking at it saying, John, you're the middle-aged white privileged guy, right, in terms of how you're approaching the world. But how do you want to encourage everyone, and I say everyone, I mean everyone. How do you want to encourage everyone on their entrepreneurial journey, but also as they think about this subject of legacy?
I do definitely. I want them. The piece of advice that I could give is, definitely stay informed, stay educated, learn everything that you can from people, learn from your social cues, learn from the necessity in your community, be part, engage. Have a voice, be the first to offer. There's definitely do not feel the word that I'm looking for. Because a lot of entrepreneurs are going to come into this and get discouraged really early on. And a piece of advice that I can give them is don't get discouraged. The truth is that there is a solution to everything. You just have to know how to apply yourself, where to apply your energy, what you're seeking, really sit down and figure out the pros and cons and fill yourself and surround yourself with people that sound different than you, people that don't, look the same, don't sound the same, because those are going to be the greatest assets really that you're going to learn from. And definitely don't be afraid to take challenges, to take risks. I think, people that live with no restrictions are really the architects of society. I think it's incredible to see so many people just pushing boundaries and not falling into, the stereotypes, into the molds of what were expected. Stay encouraged is definitely a word of advice that I can say. Stay encouraged, do your homework, do your research, find if there's demand for it. And if so, pull through, follow through, and get a great set of people in your network, because those are going to be your net worth. It really is.
That is a fantastic way to end this session. So we thank everyone for listening in. If you want to continue the conversation, please send us an email at clearconversations@ccpwealth.com. Thank you and have a blessed day.